Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly kind of just wrap-up ramble about things kind of sort of maybe related to books or YouTube and BookTube. And so I wanted to start off by just kind of checking in on what I've been reading and some kind of read-alongs, readathons, reading challenges that I've kind of low-key been participating in. So one of those things I've been, one of the readathons for May that I've been participating in a small way, was the Asian readathon. And I did finish a book I've had for probably since 1994. What is that, 16 years? That's a collection of 4 short novels by the Japanese novelist Kenzaburo Oe, which I finished that this book yesterday, and the 4th of those short novels. I really think that only one of them really is novella length, and the others are really just more like long short stories. I don't know how that works out to 4 short novels, but they were interesting. The of the 4 stories novels in this collection, 3 of them deal with very kind of painful relationships between fathers and sons, which, having read the introduction, seems to be somewhat related to the author's own issues with his father and problems with his son. The first story is "And He Himself Shall Wipe Our Tears Away" is the longest, and it is probably the strangest, essentially involving a son who believes that he is and almost willing himself to die of liver cancer, and remembering what he called the happy days, the days when he got to spend time with his father, who essentially was some kind of a political figure, a Japanese political figure in the years around. In the years during World War II, and his father gets involved in a scheme, and then anyway, it's really odd and painful and confusing, but it all kind of works itself out in the end in a way which is relatively effective. One of the things then that confused me is that there's a later story, the one called "Teach Us to Outgrow Our Madness," which is essentially feels like it's the prequel to that story, but no mention or connection of that is ever made. My favorite story in the book is called "Prize Stock," which is, disturbing and weird, but a lot more straightforward, about an African American crewman from a bomber plane that crashed near a small remote village in Japan, and he was more or less taken prisoners by this village of Japanese citizens, and then kind of weirdness goes on from there. And if I've said the word weird a lot, well, it's because these stories are pretty weird, and I really still haven't made up my mind how I feel about that. Also, as a part of Maybe Midrash, I've been reading How to Practice the Way to a Meaningful Life by the Dalai Lama, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through that, and hoping to finish that up this weekend. That's a part of my Maybe Midrash, comparing ideas of lightness or insubstantialness from Buddhism to Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So I have been reading that. I also just yesterday started reading Ursula K. Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven, which is a science fiction book, and this is a part of my goal this year to read more genre fiction. So that's kind of where I am on my reading. Now to kind of update, where I am on different reading challenges. I don't think I've made a video about this or said this, but I am participating in kind of a casual way in the Reading Women's Challenge created by Kendra Winchester over at her channel and her blog. I believe that Jacqueline from 6 Minutes for Me is now a part of the Reading Women group, and so they put out a list, kind of a challenge list. I think there are 23 or 24 things in the list where encourage you to read more books by women authors. And while that's kind of been my goal, to read more broadly different authors since I got on BookTube, this seemed like a good way to at least for me kind of keep track of that effort to read more women authors, to read more diversely. And so without necessarily picking my books because they meet things on this list, the books I've been reading for women, I've been reading by women, I've been looking at to see if they fit on this list. So I'll put the checklist up here for the Reading Women's Challenge, and I put a little gold star by the ones I think I've committed. And the very first one I cheated. I think challenge number 5 is to read a book by a woman who won the Stellar Prize or the Women's Prize for fiction. And I'm going to count Milkman as my checking off that thing on the list. Milkman did not win the Women's Prize in 2019. I believe An American Marriage by Tayari Jones won that year. But I'm going to tell you, this is probably one of the best books I will have read this year. I read it in January as a part of a read-along, as a part of Buddy to Read with Mark from Words Everywhere, and I just thought it was great. So in my mind, this should have won the Women's Prize for 2019, or it's for me the Women's Prize winner for 2019, so I'm going to count it even though that's cheating. Challenge number 6 was to read a nonfiction work of history by a female historian. I've mentioned this, I reviewed this on my channel. This biography of George Washington, You Never Forget Your First, by Alexis Cole, who is a female historian, was just delightful, great, really enjoyable. I'm kind of a George Washington fan in terms of my presidents. Yes, I'm aware of everything that you could tell me that would be a negative about him. I am aware of. But I really enjoyed this somewhat irreverent take on Washington biographies. Not irreverent necessarily about Washington, but more irreverent in kind of how it deals with other Washington biographers, which I found to be great. Challenge number 9 on the list was to read a book inspired by folklore. Pretty much, I think any Louise Erdrich book you read, which is set on Native American reservations, is going to deal with some folklore things. And in this book, the main character's mother is always engaging in remedies and folklore and their ghosts and their burial rituals and things, funeral rituals that are performed that are based on folklore. So I'm going to count that. Challenge 18 was to read a book by a female author that was less than 100 pages long. That's a part of my effort to read some of the books for the Republic of Consciousness Prize. I picked up this copy of We Are Diamond Stuff by Isabel Wadner. And even though the page count officially ends on page 105, the actual text of the novel doesn't begin until page 13, which means the book is really only 92 pages long, so I'm going to count that as a book under 100 pages. Challenge 23, or the 23rd item on the list, was to read a novel by an LGBTQ plus author. In January, I also read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. I've said this before, not completely blown away by this necessarily in the way I expected, but I thought it was good and I liked it, and so I think that completes, item 23. And then the special challenge at the bottom was to read a book by Toni Morrison, and this is where I think I really excelled, in large part thanks to Hannah over at Hannah's Books, who kind of put together this Toni Morrison reading group. We're going to try to read each of Toni Morrison's novels, one a month for the whole year. So I read The Bluest Eye, Morrison's first book, which I was surprised at how great that was. Sula, we read, and I read, which I thought was good, but not as good as The Bluest Eye. And then, what I usually or oftentimes refer to as my favorite book by Toni Morrison is Song of Solomon. We read that in March and April. We carried that one over for April because so many people, me included, were struggling with kind of the COVID-19 situation and how it affected our reading and our ability to concentrate. So there was that. That's me on the Reading Women's Challenge. Also, this in January, I believe on January the 29th, I want to say, which is Adam from Memento Mori's birthday. Some of his BookTube friends here, Britta Bowler, Doris from Alda Books, and Sean the Book Maniac, put together a Memento Mori-a-thon in which they created a bingo card, which I'll put right here, which they created a bingo card to kind of poke some fun at Adam, who hates apparently bingo cards. And I kind of wish I wish Adam would come back and make videos again, because I always found them to be interesting and entertaining. He is doing these live streams, which I've checked in on a few of those, and I've enjoyed those for the times that I could be there. So I thought, I want to participate in this. And so I went back and looked at the bingo card, and I realized that I have actually made bingo. You should know this kind of bingo thing is not something I excel at here on BookTube. So the row I completed is the, what is it, the fourth row over, the one without the free space. Notice I didn't take advantage of the free space. The one without the free space, and that would be the vertical row going up and down. I was able to find books that I think fit all of these categories. So at the top box there, the first one of those is Dude Bro Lit. Hey, I read All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. I think that definitely qualifies. By the way, I also read a short story and did a video about a short story from Ernest Hemingway, which also qualifies. And if I decide to do the second horizontal row, I may move McCarthy over to that box and see if I can't bingo twice before the end of May. We'll see. Then also there was a prompt for Women's Prize. Women's Prize. This one does not specify that you have to have a Women's Prize winner. So hey, look, there's Anna Burns' Milkman again. That gives me 2 boxes. The third box down was. Oh, the third box down is just Am Reading, in which you're supposed to just kind of discuss what you've been reading. I'm going to use Always Teach Us to Outgrow Our Madness here again, in part because my memory tells me that Adam also likes or has some of his favorite books, movies, are Japanese. That, what is it, The Girl in the Sand or The Woman in the Sand or something like that. He did a really cool video about that, comparing the book to the movie. And so I thought, well, I'll use that as my Am Reading. The fourth box down is, let's see, Desperate Housewives. Where did I put it? Oh, yes. So also as a part of my effort to read more different genres, I read romance books, Devil's Daughter by Lisa Kleypas, which focuses on a young single mother and her efforts to make her household work and to be profitable, in which she's saved by a dashing, incredibly large, incredibly well-endowed, an incredibly nice man who saves her through his knowledge of farm machinery and double-entry bookkeeping. She was pretty desperate, not sexually desperate necessarily, but desperate for some help and how to save her estate and her without having to marry somebody she didn't love, and so I'm going to count that. And then the last one is Book to Film. And so I mentioned this before, but I am reading Milan Kundera's Unbearable Lightness of Being as a part of Maybe Midrash, so this is going to count as my Book to Film book. So there we go. I've bingoed. Woohoo! And hoping to do another bingo again there. So there you go. That's some updates on my reading challenge, successes, failures, however they may be. And then and kind of how I'm doing on lots of things like that. Also, I just was over watching Steve's channel, and he mentioned that he'd gone down a rabbit hole of cryptology, the kind of Bigfoot type videos and proving Bigfoot's real or chupacabra, and he made a tag out of that. And that reminded me, not reminded me, but I thought that sounded really similar to my pursuits of weird stuff, not weird stuff, but entertainment on YouTube. I actually think YouTube is better entertainment-wise than almost everything else, because I can look for specific things. And so I've gone down some weird paths myself here. Water slides. I've been watching videos of people who take, water slides, these water slide parks, who go down these slides are like, I don't know, 8-10 stories tall, and the funny, I'm not exactly sure why I'm fascinated by these. I don't like things like that myself at all. It's not something I would do, but I've been watching those a lot. You should know I have the world's most sensitive inner ear, and motion sickness is is a real problem for me. It's one reason why I don't fish from a boat and why I haven't gotten a kayak. I can become incredibly nauseous from motion sickness in just a matter of seconds. Fortunately, watching it on YouTube, that doesn't happen. From the water slides, I went to actually watching roller coasters, which for some reason is less satisfying, maybe because there's no splash. I've also been watching videos which I would just call walk-around videos. This might be something you're interested in, since traveling right now with COVID-19 is impossible. You can find, if you just type in walk around, any city probably in the world, you can find a video in which somebody has just walked around that city and kept the camera running. My favorite are the ones that don't have music, that just have the street sounds. I've walked around London, I've walked around Munich, I've walked around Dublin, I've walked around Paris. You can find walk on the beach if you like the sound of waves on the beach. They're walk on the beach videos. I've walked around beaches in Florida and the south of France and Spain and Crete. Those have been fun. On some level, this is just me wasting time, filling the space, doing something I find pleasant. And so on some level, I felt like I was wasting my time. I was lucky enough to find a new to me YouTube channel. It's not new at all, and it's essentially called, I believe it's called Dr. K Reads the Past. I'll leave a link to that channel down below. And she is an English historian. I believe she's actually in ancient documents, restoration or interpretation. I think that's her field. And she talks a lot about Tudor history. I know that a lot of people recently have been reading The Mirror and the Light, set in King Henry VIII's court following the travails of and efforts of Thomas Cromwell. And so she talks a lot about those same time periods, and that's been really edifying, and I feel like I've learned a lot, filled in a lot of details. Sometimes she deals with the bigger issues, like what made was Henry VIII really suffering from all kinds of sicknesses. Sometimes she deals with figures who you may not have heard as much of in her videos, but they're really good and informative, and I've been liking those. Also, I want to finish up today with just some shout outs to some relatively new channels I'm not sure that I've mentioned here on my channel before, so I just wanted to shout these channels out. The first one is Expedition Through Pages. Expedition Through Pages, the young lady who runs that channel, has an interest in science and astronomy, but she also reads a lot of fiction. She participates in different kinds of read-alongs. She doesn't post videos all that often, but I do enjoy her channel, so I'll leave a link down below. I'll leave a link to her channel down below. One of the newest channels that I found through my own comment section is a channel by a woman named Courtney Ferreter. She calls herself America's Jewish Mother, which is really enjoyable. She's been putting out a lot of videos, including the BookTube newbie tag. She created a tag, which I'll be doing on Tuesday of this week, which I think is it called the Final Exam tag? I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but I will do the tag on Tuesday. Delightful, good content. I believe she teaches, I think she said she teaches composition to college level students, so she has a lot of real interesting reading choices and tastes. James Hold, the next two are shout outs to channels here in Texas. James Holder, who you may have seen in your comment section, does a lot of tags. He reads a lot of fantasy. His taste and mine don't always overlap, but he makes good videos. He has interesting discussions. And then Alan Braswell, also a fellow Texan, and like lots of Texans, fairly outspoken. He does a lot of tags as well. He does reading updates. He and I some of our interests mesh in terms of reading things about World War I and pieces of fiction set during World War I. So, go check out those channels. They're good booktubers. Not necessarily all really new, but, booktubers that I think would be worthwhile for you to check out. Well, there you go. I think that's my Saturday hodgepodge. I think I've talked about everything I could possibly talk about book-related here. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.